Sorry about that cough. I seem to be getting a little bit of a frog somewhere, or salamander, or some sort of reptile. I usually review the lectionary on a blog called Text Week, and I found that it wasn't updated this week. Earlier in the week, it was not updated, and the lady apologized because her mother had just been put in hospice, and so she'd asked for prayers as they went through this difficult time. 2 days later, she apologized that it was not going to be updated at all because they were traveling to her mother's funeral. There are times in which Lazarus' story ends up becoming entirely too close to our own, and words entirely fail us. We experience it multiple times, but we seem to deal with death by not dealing with it. Life is a terminal condition. I tell clients that all the time. But realistically, any of us could die at any time. The random car accident, the meteor that hits us on the head, the odd blue ice incident from a random flying airplane. But it's one thing to intellectually agree with an existential truth, and quite another to be confronted with the real thing. When earlier Mary anoints Jesus' feet with all that valuable perfume, the reason it's valuable is because it's also used in the anointing of the body for burial. And I can't imagine that she thought that she would have needed it for her brother in just a few days' time. I can't imagine that she would have thought, what am I going to do now? And this is not just grieving for Lazarus, because it's also grieving for Martha and Mary. Understand that as the brother of two unmarried sisters, they are in a very precarious position in the real world. Women were dependent on their male relatives to provide them with economic security, with housing, with future, with whatever potential for marriage that they might have. He would have arranged their marriages if there was going to be one. Now that he's dead, Mary and Martha might as well seal themselves into that tomb as well. Their options are severely limited. They could become servants, they could become beggars, they could become prostitutes, or they could become gleaners. As much as Mary and Martha love their Lord, I imagine they're feeling quite a bit of panic at this time. They're probably not able to see beyond their own pain at this moment. I don't think it's any wonder that Mary and Martha's first words to Jesus are, "If you had been here, my brother would not have died." Their second sentence softens it, but it is clear that in that moment they love their Lord and blame him a little for him not being there. They're not really thinking about what other ministries Jesus has at that time, or of the increasing danger that Jesus is under from the Pharisees. They can't see that even if their brother is miraculously resurrected at this time, it doesn't mean that he might not still die again in a week. It doesn't mean that they won't still suffer the same tragedy sometime again in the future. All things die. They don't think about the pain and the fatigue that Christ is dealing with. All that pain, all those people who are depending on him, they're so caught up in their pain that they're entombed in their own grief. So much of what causes us misery is wanting things to be other than they are. There's a Buddhist teaching story of a woman crushed by the loss of her child. She had gone everywhere, to every lama, asking someone to bring her child back from the dead, and finally went to the Buddha. Looking with compassion on her pain, the Buddha said that he could bring her child back from the dead if she could bring him onion seed to make the potion from a family who had never been touched by death. Well, at first she thought this was going to be an easy task because onion seed is easy to find. Everybody has it. And then the seed was easy to find, but not the second part. No matter where she looked, everyone had been touched by death. A parent, a child, a sibling. Though she was not able to resurrect her child, she found that by realizing how much of her pain was shared by others, she was able to let her own pain go. By having compassion by the pain shared by her neighbors, she became less centered in her own pain and could move on. We are all Lazarus at one time or another, feeling as though we were already entombed. At such times it feels as though no one can come close to touching us, so caught up in our own pain as we are. Instead of the tomb being crafted of stone around us, we create the tomb in our hearts. We enshrine the pain and will not let it go, keeping us stuck in pain, alone, and living in the dust of what might have been. At others, we are like Martha and Mary, angry that God did not act in the way that we thought he should, fearful of what might happen in the future, feeling alone in our struggles. We do not want the burdens God puts on us. We want things to be easier, and we blame God for the pain we have to endure. We feel outmatched, outplayed, and outwitted. Like the people in the UK recently that spent a year filming a live remote where they had to develop a way of creating a healthy community all on their own, only to find out that the show was canceled after 4 episodes and no one told them they could stop. Father Thomas Keating called this the dark nights of the soul. And how do we turn these dark nights into the glory of God? It's important to recognize that human beings are literally built to grow from stress. A prenatal researcher called Pathak Wadhwa wrote that there is indeed a kind of biological law at work before we are even born. Our stem cells do not differentiate and become us if there's not enough biological stress to encourage them to do so. Without stress and opposition, complex life like ours would never have even developed. We would never have come into being. We would never have come. When you think of learning to walk or ride a bicycle, can you imagine ever being able to do it without having fallen down? Pain is an inevitable part of growth. Even those parts like illness and death that are not the things that we look forward to growing through. In the Book of Joy, a conversation between Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama, they talk about the importance of community in the experience of the divine. This God is community, fellowship. Being created by this God, we are created in order to flourish, and we flourish in community. Lazarus' return from the dead was not a private affair. It was witnessed by a crowd of mourners. Most were kind, though some echo those throughout Jesus' life, asking why he could not have done more. This still happens today. When the tornado turns at the last minute and causes less damage and injuries than expected, some complain that if God were really good, then the tornado would have missed us completely. When the bridge falls in Atlanta and no one is injured, some say if God were really good, it wouldn't have fallen at all. We want to be insulated totally from the pain, but we're not built for that. Bishop Tutu would say that no matter how severe the pain, we can still be grateful for the blessing of the kind nurse who is trying to make you comfortable, the hospital that is keeping you warm and safe, the medical professionals who have studied to learn how to help you, and the schools that taught them how to care for you. There is so much good in this world that we ignore, focusing instead on the negative and the immediate crisis. What can God grow in us from this pain? Isn't this what we should be asking ourselves? Nothing beautiful in the end comes without a measure of some pain, some frustration, some suffering. This is the nature of things. This is how our universe has been made up. Out of the depths I have called to you, O Lord. And God does respond, though not always in the way or in the time that we expect. Dee wanted to be a mother. For years, she and her husband tried everything, from traditional medicines to herbal and Chinese remedies, and even the hardest long shots of all long shots, but nothing worked. In the end, neither did the marriage. And she pushed all of those desires to be a mother into a little tiny hole in a locket in her heart, focusing all of her effort into being a good secretary, a good business person. Several years later, she moved halfway across the country because of a man. Let's be serious, there's always a man. The only job available in that tiny town was as a secretary. Happened to be in an elementary school. She told me that it was like God opened her eyes all at once. Now she teaches elementary school and is grateful for God each day for the hundreds of children God gave her. The man she eventually married had kids and grandkids of his own. She told me with tears in her eyes that she may never have had her own, but she was there when her new daughter gave birth to her grandchild. That's why Lazarus' story was important. Not just because God's power was manifest 2,000 years ago, but because somehow God's power is made manifest every single day in a heart that is certain that their possibility has died, only to have been reborn in a new way that they could have never imagined.